Alrighty, well, good afternoon. My name is Dana Young. I'm the Preschool Promise Program Manager, and I have a couple of colleagues here with me. Welcome. We'll go ahead and do some brief introductions. Meredith Russell, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Meredith Russell, and I work at the Early Learning Division on the program team with Dana and Crystal and Miriam and others, and I'm a colleague of Michael's here. So really great to be with all of you today. I'm going to be your virtual valet and work on the chat box in the waiting room. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. And I see my also my other colleague, Meredith Fleming, who I work with as well. So yes, two Merediths, F and R.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Meredith Fleming, and I am one of your two grant managers. So working on the fiscal side of reporting and things for Preschool Promise grantees, along with Anthony. Pass it to him.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Martirano. I'm a member of the grants team working to support Preschool Promise. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I'll pass it to Michael Connor.
Hi, I'm Michael Connor. I work on the professional learning systems team. I help coordinate the technical assistance that goes to our ELD funded preschool programs like Preschool Promise and Oregon Pre-Kindergarten Head Start. I'll pass it over to Elizabeth Z.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Zinter, and I work with Michael in professional learning, and I work on the infant toddler end of things. So I'm the infant toddler specialist here.
And I know we may have Crystal Garcia. There's a lot of people joining us. So Crystal, go ahead. And she may be traveling right now, but Crystal Garcia, some of you may know her. She's one of our operations and policy analysts here for Preschool Promise, primarily focused on Preschool Promise enrollment. So she works closely with our early learning hubs across the state. Alrighty, well, let me go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get started. Just a moment. Okay, well, here we are. So welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and go over our agenda real quick. We're going to go over some new communication tools that we're using right now across the division and with our Preschool Promise grantees. Then we're going to turn it over to Michael to go ahead and talk to us about embedding equity in our Preschool Promise program. We know that's a grant deliverable. So how does that look like in practice for all of our Preschool Promise grantees? Then we'll go ahead and turn it over to our grants team, who's going to give us some reminders regarding like our fiscal requirements and some of those pieces. And then I'm going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time on discussing our grant deliverables and requirements and what does that look like as we continue on with our program year. And then we're going to go ahead and hear from Liz. We do have some support for those of you who are offering services to infant and toddler. So she's going to talk to us about some resources available to you all that you can take advantage of. Ready? And throughout the meeting, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Meredith will be answering some of the questions if she knows that she knows the answers. And towards the end of the meeting, if we have time, we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&A. But just, given the volume of attendees during this meeting, we'll be using the chat message to go ahead and get your questions and hopefully have time at the end to go ahead and get those answers to you. As always, if we're not able to answer a question to you, we'll go ahead and ensure that we add it to the next Gov delivery. Alrighty, well, let's talk about some of the communications tools that we have available. You may have noticed a little bit of a shift in our Gov delivery emails that we send out, and we are now transitioning to a monthly newsletter for our grantees. So once a month, you'll go ahead and get a full monthly newsletter that has important announcements, information about quality requirements, any kind of fiscal reminders and more. So just keep that, just take that into consideration. Before we were sending out like Gov delivery every month. Now we are transitioning to a monthly newsletter and then maybe, one more reminder throughout the month. If we have any urgent communication that we need to go ahead and get out to you, we're going to go ahead and get that sent out to you. Super important that you are getting those scout deliveries, because that is our main, kind of one of our main channels of communication to you all. And then newly released, we have an Instagram account. So our communications team is wanting you to be in the know. We have an Instagram account, and there's that profile name. We're asking all of our stakeholders and grantees and everybody who we work with to go ahead and just help us increase our members there, our followers. So if you can go ahead and do that by sharing it through your own social media groups, go ahead and letting your families or other people in community know about our Instagram account. And then our communications team has developed a media toolkit for you all to go ahead and use, that has like pictures and images and some of those pieces, PowerPoint presentations that you can go ahead and use as you're engaging with families and other community members. So we'll go ahead and all of that information from this meeting, we'll go ahead and send it to you all. So we'll go ahead and make sure to go ahead and include that media kit in there for you to go ahead and help us increase our followers there. There's also some opportunities for us to be able to spotlight some of you in community. So there's information on the toolkit. If you want to get spotlight in our Instagram or Facebook account, there's a process there that you can follow, so we can go ahead and ensure that happens. So, alrighty, well, let's go ahead and talk about your grant requirements. And within your grant, we have a section there for equity, objectives, and deliverables. So kind of what are some of the expectations as a preschool promise grantee? So we're going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time just touching on this topic about what does the grant require and what does that look like in practice. So you can go ahead and refer to your grant, but some of your objectives there is like, Grantee's entire organization will work to build a climate that promotes acceptance for all individuals, right? We're really wanting you to go ahead and like read through those objectives and really just look into your organization and see how you are implementing equity. Grantee staff must understand the communities they serve. We are a mixed delivery. We are serving, a lot of different communities. So ensuring that your staff is pretty well in tune with some of the values and norms and history and cultures, just ensuring that your staff is highly supported. I'm now going to go ahead and read each of these objectives because you all have them in your grant agreement, but this is just a little bit of just a reminder for us as far as like you as a preschool promise grantee, what is required being a publicly funded program. So I'm going to, and like I said, on your grant agreement, you have you can go ahead and read all of those objectives there for you to go ahead and like read them with your staff and just kind of see some opportunities there. I'm going to go ahead and touch on some of the expectations. We've been getting a lot of emails about where do I report some of the like equity training. There is a requirement that all staff attend a minimum of 4-hour equity training. You, as you're working through your program, you get to go ahead and decide what kind of equity training you want your staff to go ahead and do that. So there's been some questions about like when and how are we going to be collecting this information. So we want to go ahead and reduce the burden on reports for you all. So we're going to be embedding this question on your program update, which is going to be your 3rd quarterly report. So just go ahead and stay tuned on that. We're trying to go ahead and minimize the different links that you have to go to go ahead and inform us of this. So you're going to go ahead and tell us about the progress that you're making and whether you met this deliverable through your program update, which is for the 3rd quarter. So now I touch base on like what does the grant require? What does it look like? I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael. And just kind of taking it a step further as far as like, well, what does that look like in practice? So go ahead, Mike.
Great, thank you. And you said I have just 2.5 hours for this presentation. So
Exactly.
oh, 10 minutes. Okay, great. That's great. Okay, well, let's keep going. What I wanted to kind of think together with you about is, okay, well, there's the grant deliverable. It's sitting there in black and white. What does the process look like for getting to that deliverable? What can your quality specialists do to support you in this? And how does the quality playbook figure in? The quality requirements playbook is what the quality specialist leans into around supporting grantees to improve the quality of your programs. So I'm going to kind of take the position of the quality specialist and walk through some of the ways that equity shows up in the quality playbook and how this might lead to a plan that includes the training that's required. Next slide, please. So I did a highly technical and sophisticated thing with the Preschool Promise Quality Requirements Playbook, which is that I searched for the word equity and found it in the playbook, and then tried to think, okay, well, what is the story that the playbook is trying to say around equity? It shows up in these 5-6 places around program mission and values, program goals, professional development, data, and your quality improvement process. And I noticed that in the first one, it says consistent with the Oregon equity lens. So let's look at these kind of one at a time and see how that might show up for you. So next slide. The Oregon equity lens is a document that guides a lot of our work. It's a pretty interesting document in that it talks about equity from a variety of ways to talk about it. So it talks about, well, what do we believe is true about equity? It provides a list of questions that can guide our activities. I did my best to kind of summarize what the equity lens challenges us to do. It says we got to ask questions about how our services are affecting different groups, especially groups that face historic and ongoing barriers. We need to involve people in thinking about our work together and in evaluating our success and our challenges. We're going to collect a lot of information about how our services are impacting people, the ways that people are participating, and we're going to be able to talk about different groups within the data according to lots of different ways to categorize different groups according to culture, ethnicity, language, and there's probably more. And we do that because we want to meet people's needs, and we recognize that when we just lump everybody together, we often miss what's going on with important partners. And finally, and this has a big deal around the grant requirement for training, our professional learning plan reflects what we know, based on looking at the data with partners and asking critical questions about how we're doing. So that's what the Oregon Equity Lens is about. If you're in our field and you're at this meeting, probably a lot of that's familiar to you, but it's a pretty interesting way to think about, well, what do we mean by equity and how do we attack questions of, are we being fair? How can we do better like that? Next slide, please. So Jennifer's asking a question in chat. Will the ELD offer, oops, I lost it. Offer equity training for programs or recommendations for how to get the equity training? That's what this presentation right now is all about. How are you going to get to, with your quality specialist, figuring out the training that you want? So I really appreciate that question. So here's that list again of where equity, it shows up some other places, but here's 5 places it shows up in the playbook. So let's look at them one at a time. Next slide, please. So that first place that you're invited to think about equity is in how you talk about who you are and what's important in your program. When you talk about your purpose, your reason for being, that mission statement, your values, we'd encourage you, challenge you, invite you to embed equity in talking about who you are. By participating in Preschool Promise, you're already committed to prioritizing families in your community who have modest incomes, and to working with the hub We work to enroll people at, so they represent the diversity of the communities that you serve. So by signing up for Preschool Promise and agreeing to do Preschool Promise, you're already baking in some equity commitments there, right? You're no longer, or you're not in a situation where you're enrolling based on who can pay. You're enrolling based on what's the community need. And and the way we define community need includes some important questions around income and diversity. And then the second part there, it says consistent with the equity lens. So you're working with the hub, like I said, around enrolling representative diverse families. Next slide. So the next thing that the Preschool Promise Playbook says, and your quality specialist might dialogue with you about, did I just use the word dialogue as a verb? I would like to apologize to all of my friends here. We can delete that part of the recording. Your quality specialist might want to chat with you about what program goals you have that are connected with equity. So in this little conversation, I'm assuming, it's like you went back to college and you took Econ 101. Assume a survey. Assume that you survey your parents every quarter and you ask the families in your program, are you satisfied with our program? Let's just pretend that's true for a second. You'd ask it in a much more sophisticated way, right? You'd talk about the way that their children are growing and thriving and all the cool stuff that you do with your family. But for our conversation purposes, let's pretend there's a simple survey. Are you satisfied with our program? And so you might, if you had that survey, you might set a program goal to increase satisfaction to 85%. You want 85% of your families to say, yep, we dig this program. And the equity part would be, you want it to be true for all cultural and ethnic groups. You don't want to have one or more groups that are not satisfied, right? Like you might serve a lot of Bulgarian families, and let's say the Bulgarian families, raise your hand if you serve, well, anyway, the Bulgarian families might say, well, we're only satisfied at 70% of us. And everyone knows that the Bulgarians are notoriously hard to work with. But if you had a group like that, I'm just kidding, I love Bulgarians. If you had a group like that, you'd want to think, okay, well, how do we reach out to that group in particular? Maybe it's an ethnic group. Maybe it's a language group. Maybe it's a particular family configuration. Like maybe all the married and intact families are feeling great about your program, but the single dads are really struggling with your program. So you'd want to know that, and then you'd want to think, well, how can we address that? Because we want to make sure that our program is working for everyone, not just everyone in general, but actually all the different ways that people identify. So you'd set a super cool SMART goal like this that's measurable. It's just side comment, it's like super snowy right now, and it's never snowy in Southeast Portland. So I'm a little bit squirrel on the call here, but I'm staying with you because I care. Sorry, Sean, I know it's always snowy in Roseburg. So anyway, and we're going to look at that. So next slide, please. So now you think, what do you mean my internet connection's unstable? That doesn't seem right. So now we start talking about a little training. Okay, so you're focusing on families being satisfied with your program, and that might lead you to say, you know what we want for all of our folks and our staff that work with children and families is we want more training around how to be culturally responsive when we're working with families. Culturally responsive family engagement strategies, theory, practice, strategies, tactics, methods, tools, all that kind of stuff. And we want it for everybody in our program because we want to make sure that families that participate have a good experience in our program. That's our priority. That's a goal that we've set around the data from our family survey. And so we're going to work with the the quality specialist, to arrange training on culturally responsive family engagement for everybody in our program that works with kids and families. So that's the bus driver, that's the clerk, that's the custodian, that's the cook, that's all the teaching teams, that's whatever kind of program you're leading. That could be the topic of your equity training of interest culturally responsive family engagement. Next slide. In the playbook, it also talks about data for children and families. So we've talked about this idea of a family satisfaction survey. You're looking at that data, you're separating the results by culture, ethnicity, language groups, other ways that are interesting, and you're analyzing that. Next slide. The last thing on the list is the quality improvement process needs to include equity. So I made something up here. I said parents from different backgrounds meet with program leaders every 3 months to talk about what the surveys say, talk about what you learned from the families and how to make the program better. So you could partner with parents in analyzing results from the survey and thinking together, well, what are they saying? You could ask more questions, right? Not just, are you satisfied, but what's something the staff person did today or this month or this quarter that made your family feel welcome in our program? Did anyone do anything that made you feel less than welcome? You could look at results like that with parents and think together, how can we make our program better? Do we need better signs that welcome people? Do we need more people greeting families in different languages? I don't know the answer, right? But parents might have some ideas about that. Next slide. I think if you put all these together, it kind of looks like a plan. It looks like you started by defining who you are in terms of equity, by setting a goal that you can measure, by connecting professional development training to that goal, by looking at data and including lots of interesting people in the conversation about how to improve the program. And that looks like a plan where the training deliverable is in the middle of a larger conversation about how your program shows up to make your services high quality and fairly implemented for lots of different groups of families and children. So that's a little bit of my thinking, hopefully helpful, on where the question of what's our equity deliverable training, how does that sit in a larger conversation around embedding equity in your Preschool Promise program?
Thank you, Michael. And for those of you that have questions about what Michael just covered, just go ahead and add them to the chat. And then we'll go ahead and take some time at the end to go ahead and answer some of those questions. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to our grants team. They're here to go ahead and talk to us about some fiscal reminders as we're, kind of closing the biennium, like what are some things that you want to consider? So grants team.
Great, thanks, Dana. It's kind of crazy to think that we're already talking or considering closing out a grants year, right? It's amazing how fast, and yet on a daily basis, it feels like it goes so slow. So some basic reminders here, yet very important. I'm going to kind of go out of order on these. I'm start with the bottom bullet point is the payment process. Really want to remind and draw everyone back to the 3 steps ultimately in order for your entity or your organization to receive funds through Preschool Promise. And there's three important elements. There's your draw report, and you utilizing the Preschool Promise calculator, and then submitting your EGMS claim. So ultimately what you're doing is you're utilizing the Smartsheet form in order to submit your draw report. This is essentially your line items that you're looking to bill for the current period, whether that's the current month or previous months. You're taking that total number. For example, I'm looking to claim $10,000 for the month of February. And I'm going to take $10,000 and I'm going to enter that value into the Preschool Promise calculator to determine the proper or correct split between your general funds subgrant and your student success, your SSA subgrant. And then you're taking those splitted numbers and you're entering those into EGMS. The key there is that the draw report and the EGMS claims, they must match and they must correspond. So if you have submitted a draw report and you have not submitted an EGMS claims, the corresponding claims for EGMS, it won't be reviewed and you won't get paid, and vice versa. If you submit an EGMS claim but no draw report, the notification that you'll get is a rejection notice informing you to resubmit your EGMS claims once you've completed and submitted your job report. So again, just a reminder there for most folks are doing it correctly and efficiently, though again, just as a quick reminder, as we know that have multiple staff within your entities. Couple important dates, as you all know, the current grant agreement or performance period ends June 30th, 2023. Please put a circle, star, asterisk on your calendars. In order for expenses to be considered eligible, they must be incurred prior to this date. Okay, so I'll just read it, what we have typed there. So all goods and services must be paid for, received, installed, and operational by June 30th, 2023 to be eligible and billed to the grant. This is tangible and intangible, right? This is all items. They must be incurred prior to, on, or before June 30th. Again, received, installed, because we're coming to an end of a biennium or end of a grant agreement period. A lot of inquiries about bigger items, or trying to spend down your funds, or trying to purchase materials or build playgrounds. Again, all those items must be on the ground, operational and functional prior to June 30th to be considered allowable and eligible under your Preschool Promise grant. If they are not, you will run the risk of getting an email saying these aren't eligible, and you're going to have to cover those with other funds. So again, this is a reminder there. Shouldn't be a surprise for anyone, but again, just as a quick reminder. The next bullet point is talking about when is the last date you can actually file a claim for the current Preschool Promise performance period. That is August 14th, 2023. So make sure you get that that date to your fiscal folks, or the folks that are responsible for requesting funds. You have 45 days from the end of the performance period of June 30th. That's where August 14th comes from. That means that you have a period of time to close out your books, balance your books, and make sure that you're taking your final funds from your EGMs or your awarded grant amount. So again, August 14th, 2023, very important date as it connects to the end of the grant period of June 30th. We've received a few questions from folks as they're starting to tabulate and close out their books. Just a quick reminder, administrative costs are capped at 15%, meaning you cannot go above 15%. You can certainly go below, and it's based on what your entity has determined reasonable and appropriate. And again, all expenses need to be reasonable, necessary, and directly related to Preschool Promise. So I will leave it at that, other than draw your attention to the image to the right of the slide. Again, the slides will be provided. Everyone should have already had access to our budget and payment overview form. This has all of the links. But again, if you don't, for some reason, when you receive the screens, the slide deck, you'll have access to that form with all the contained links.
Thank you, Anthony. We're going to go ahead and move to the next section of the meeting, and then it looks like we are going to go ahead and have some time for some Q&A at the end of the meeting. So we'll go ahead and put your question on the chat. Meredith is collecting all those questions, so we can go ahead and address your questions there. Well, one of the questions that we keep getting is like, what's the plan as we continue with the program year, as far as like continuation, and what does that look like? So just go ahead and do some general just announcements on what the plan is. We're currently still working with our procurement office and just really seeing like, what does that look like, and how can we go ahead and ensure that the processes are smooth and also in a timely fashion. So then like what is with your grant. One of the things, like the phase that we're going to enter right now, is really just grounding ourselves back into like the grant deliverables. Like, what is it that we're expecting from the grant, and how can we go ahead and provide you with the support that you need to be super successful? I did wanted to go ahead and add here our definition for Preschool Promise, because a lot of you probably sometimes get asked, like, what is Preschool Promise? So you may use it for your marketing materials or your website. Here's just to ground us. Here's what Preschool Promise is. So feel free to go ahead and use that in all of your like website or marketing pieces. But I figure like we take a little bit of time to really ground us back into what Preschool Promise is and how over the next couple months, we're going to be reaching out to you to go ahead and learn a little bit more about your some of the resources and support that you may need. So Preschool Promise provides families with free, high quality preschool that uses a different mixed delivery approach, giving families the ability to choose the setting that works best for them and their child. So it's really, we're really grounding ourselves back up to like, what is it the families and community are needing? What is the, you know, and I think you've heard me say this in other meetings, it's like our clients or those children. So how are we ensuring that you have the supports and tools necessary to be super successful with your grant? So where we are when we're talking about like continuation processes and what does that look like is over the next couple weeks, you're going to go ahead and hear from us. ELD will go ahead and continue to review the data that you have provided to us through the different reports. And then we're going to go ahead and continue to monitor some of the grant deliverables. For example, reporting requirements. Reports are, you know, a big piece of our grant. So it's just ensuring like, how are we doing with reports? The number of hours per day, the numbers of days per week, where are grantees at with SPARK participation, the start and end time of a daily schedule, your licensing status for those who are required to be licensed, where are we at, you know, as you may be aware of, for those of you that have been part of Preschool Promise or you went through the RFA, we went ahead and looked at compliance opportunities that we may have had. So we're going to do that. And then enrollment percentages. How are we doing with enrollment? Statewide Preschool Promise right now, I believe that we're really close to the 80% enrollment. So we are going to start reaching out to grantees and just, you know, learning a little bit more about those who may not be fully enrolled or still working through that grant requirement. We'll be doing some follow-up with and continue to monitor on open sites. We know that many or a few of our grantees across the state are still having some challenges opening their site. One of the main reasons being like staffing opportunities and issues across the state. So kind of like what we're doing within the next couple weeks here is we're going to continue to review the data. We're going to continue to monitor grant deliverables. We're going to go ahead and follow up with some of our grantees that may be on corrective action plans and then see how if we're making progress in those corrective action plans. So I just listed just a few. This is not to be intended to be like the, you know, we know that your grant is pretty big and it has a lot of like grant deliverables, but this is just to name a few. So, and then also to inform you over the next couple of weeks, ELD will connect with grantees who, based on the data that you're providing to us, may not meet certain deliverables, and then just see how we can support you, right? How can we support grantees either through local supports or here at ELD or maybe a different support. So that's kind of when we're talking about like continuation and kind of like what is the process. This is the first process, is us like reviewing all of the data that you've submitted and then connect with you and learn more about like what are families taking. Going back to what is Preschool Promise, we're offering a free quality service and community to families. Why trying to learn a little bit more from you about why families are not taking advantage of that service if you are like low enroll, or what kind of support do you need so we can go ahead and get you, you know, started with your SPARK participation. So this leads to our reporting requirements. So we have we've been analyzing a lot of our data and we are seeing them, a lot of our grantees, I believe the last time we checked is like 45 to 50% of all of our Preschool Promise grantees are missing at least one report. So you're going to go ahead and we're calculating all of that data and we're reaching out to grantees. We're going to start reaching out either by email, individual email, or individual phone call, and just try to help you get in, get your reports in. All of the reports are super important. One that's really like super important is going to be the site report. That is the report that you are informing us on about what is the number of hours per day, the start and end time, the curriculum, the assessment, your site, how many slots, and we're still missing about 58 reports across the state that we're needing to go ahead and get in, because as you may be aware of, all of our reports are connected to the site report because all of our reports at the site level. So we have, I've added the link here. We have also provided all of you with our required reports and do this checklist that you can either print, or if you save it to your computer, it actually, if you hover over the name, you can actually, it takes you straight to the report because all the links are embedded. And then we have our monthly report, super important report. That's you're informing us, going back to what preschool promises are families and community taking advantage of the services that we're providing, or what are you learning that are some of the challenges or successes that your program may be having with enrollment. How's attendance looking, and how can we support families there? We have our first quarterly report, which was staff information. So you're informing us of the staff and their qualifications and some of those pieces. All of our reporting is through Smartsheets, with the exception of that first quarter report and your end of the year report that is through JotForm. But other than that, we either use Smartsheets or JotForm to go ahead and help you. Just some friendly reminders as we're working towards getting all of our reports in. It's on the 16th of every month, you actually get a summary report of where your site is and what reports you're missing. All of our reports are done by site, so you get a little summary that tells you what's going on. If you're not receiving that summary, most likely that is because we don't have the right contact information. So if you have new staff and we need to get that updated, please remember to use your update and change form. That is used to go ahead and change your business name, the number of slots, your phone number, email, everything goes through that form. One thing, that we want to go ahead and just give a friendly reminder, we're working through SharePoint and ensuring that you have access. And I'll go ahead and take a little bit of we'll take a couple minutes here. If you who are in this meeting do not have access to SharePoint, please go ahead and put that on the chat message there. If you can put your email. I know that at the beginning of the program year, or kind of the end of the year, we were having some challenges with SharePoint. So we have communicated with our IT team. So we may still have some emails that are not included in there. So if you are still don't have access to SharePoint, go ahead and put your email there. Meredith's going to be collecting those emails, and we're going to go ahead and turn that over to IT department so you have access to SharePoint. One thing to remember is that you don't need to have access to SharePoint to complete your reports, but they're all found there. So just kind of giving you different ways of meeting this grant deliverable of your requirements for reporting. So we're going to be sharing these links. You have everything here. It looks like, let me take a look here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Liz, who's going to go ahead and talk to us here about some of the different supports that we have through the CCRNR. Go ahead, Liz.
Okay, thank you, Dana. Yeah, I won't take too much time, but for those of you serving infants and toddlers, wanted to highlight a resource that's available through the CCRNR. So similar to the quality specialists you have for Preschool Promise, we also have specialists at CCRNR that focus on infant and toddlers. This graphic shows a little bit about what those specialists do. They host infant toddler focused childcare networks for infant toddler providers. They also do individualized coaching, technical assistance, They are trained for the most part, we're working on another training, but in the 0 to 3 critical competencies for infant toddler educators. And they every so often will provide that training, and they can provide coaching based on that training, as well as many other really high quality trainings focused on infant and toddler. They support programs seeking pathways to public funding, which you guys are familiar with as Preschool Promise grantees. And then they really facilitate those peer connections for infant and toddler educators. So we wanted to just highlight that they are there as a resource for those of you that do have infants and toddlers. They can work together with your Preschool Promise quality specialist, and we hope that they do. But if you want more information on them, you can feel free to reach out to your CCR&R. They are highly qualified and really have a wealth of information regarding infant and toddler topics, and are there to support the community at large. So thank you.
Thank you there, Liz. Well, we can go ahead and stop sharing for a little bit, and Meredith, we can open it up for questions.
Thank you. We had a couple of questions in the chat box, but I think I answered them. We just have a new one here at the bottom, Zakia. Any financial incentives for programs retaining their infant toddler slots? I'm not sure if that was maybe for you, Liz.
I'm assuming that would be for Dana regarding if Preschool Promise provides financial incentives for the toddler slots.
Yeah, and through our Preschool Promise services or funds, it's only for preschool age kiddos, but that's a great question. We can go ahead and look into if there's other like funding sources available. We know that we have Baby Promise in some of like the hub regions, so that maybe we can go ahead and take a look like what's the plans for expansion there, because there is Baby Promise in some of the hub regions there. Great question though. So it will be a no from Preschool Promise. We'll go ahead and look and see if there's other resources or what are the plans for expansion there on Baby Promise.
I had a question about the fiscal year-end close down. In the past, I understand all the work has to be done, goods have to be received, everything by June 30th. But I saw the new wording in there about paid for. So say someone works on June 30th, our district does a second payroll run that goes out on the first week of July that covers work that year end during that time period. Also, sometimes things get received the last week in June, and as long as they're received, we had been able to pay for it out of this biennium funding. But the payment may not go out until the first week of July after the items have been received. But is it a new change that they have to be paid for? Because then that would be a kind of a big process change.
So paid for would be the same as being essentially invoiced for, right? Understanding that there are circumstances as you described. The point is we would not be overly excited to see someone putting an order in on June 30th and trying to just spend down funds just because there are extra funds that weren't spent, right? So the whole idea is a plan, right? What was your plan? So again, being paid for is essentially going to be like in a perfect world, like the actual check was actually cut or the credit card was actually swiped, but at a bare minimum, it needs to be essentially invoiced and saying, yes, in fact, this was paid for, right? Or the funds are being encumbered or allocated towards that prior to the June 30th. Again, the key piece of it is so long as the services or the materials have been received prior to June 30th, then you're okay.
Okay, so is it possible to get a clarification sent that it doesn't need to be, as long as it's been encumbered or the service has been performed or the items have been received? Because our financial folks go really clearly by what's written there. So they were worried about that statement that said it must be paid for, because that would be a big change.
Sure, we can make sure that there's some additional clarification provided on that, no problem.
That would be great.
Meredith, any pending questions?
We do have another question here. Can you clarify about the admin cost, 15% total of expenses? Give a random example, please.
Yeah, so admin costs, you're looking at your another way of saying that is your indirect, right? So these are going to be essentially your charges that are supporting the services of your operation that are related to Preschool Promise, as opposed to the direct services related to Preschool Promise. So I've seen folks look at admin space, right there, where their administration location is, right, where their admin, I'm sorry, their admin staff essentially function or complete their jobs. That's probably the most common example.
We have a question about if there will be funding available for summer programs and when we might know more about that.
Great question. At this time with Preschool Promise, there are no there's no funds available like through Preschool Promise to go ahead and continue on through like the summer. Our program, our grant ends on June 30th of 2023. But, as we move forward, we know that that is like super important, it's a need for our families. So we are, definitely always looking for the opportunity how we can go ahead and like provide those services in the summer. But as of now, the grant ends on June 30th. So we don't have anything that extends beyond June 30th.
Yeah, it looks like lots of interest in summer funds. And then somebody shared that they see that the Oregon budget forecast is very positive. In fact, I believe it would pay for everything that was in the governor's budget, and question what this might mean for PSP.
Great question. I think that we're all really happy about that proposal. I think what we're really looking for PSP is like, how do we provide more support for inclusionary practices, right? Inclusionary support you and your staff and the program and the children so they can go ahead and get the best quality of service. So I think, we're looking at some more, you all provided some great feedback last year on like what additional supports do we need, and some of those pieces were like staff salaries. We ended up providing some sorry, I'm getting my messages here, I apologize. So it was staff salaries and more support, transportation. How do we go ahead and like improve transportation? We know that some grantees want to go ahead and offer transportation, but they may not have the infrastructure to go ahead and do that, and that impacts your family. So how can we be a little bit flexible in there? So I think when it comes to that proposal, definitely will help us with salaries, with inclusionary practices, with and then also some of you are mentioning like summer programming that will also help us there too. Meredith, anything you want to mention on that? Because you're also super in tune with that. Russell.
Yeah, what you're talking about with the budgeting process and yeah, well, we actually just had a meeting with our team talking about the governor's budget, which is the budget that we move forward with. And I will just say there's so much in it that our leaders are just getting all of the documents and all of the back end documents and the detailed documents to really understand what is going where and what it all means. And so they're working through it as we speak. I think we'll probably have more information in the coming weeks with a little bit more detail. I'm happy to put the budget link in the chat box. People can look through it as well. And you can see in there that the governor has some hopes and plans for summer programming, looking not at this summer, but next summer. And again, we don't know what that means, how that will shake out, but it's encouraging. And like Dana was saying, some other supports for early learning programs, but I think our leadership is just at the beginning of digging through. So we appreciate your patience as we learn more about what it means, and then we'll share that with all of you as soon as we get any clarity. And I'll invite any of the other ELD colleagues that are on the call. I know there's several. If anybody else has any thoughts or insight into that, jump in.
Hmm.
Kind of along those lines, somebody asked, with that said, will you advise us on how to help PSP families secure funding for summer care? And I can add some thoughts to that, but Dana, what would your thoughts be on that one?
Yeah, great question. I mean, as we help like families during the summer, I mean, ERDC is a great service that families may want to go ahead and take advantage of. You know, that's the first one that kind of comes to mind will be ERDC. Meredith?
Yeah, I was just going to share, you know, we at the ELD sometimes hear about initiatives that are going on either through other state agencies or private organizations or foundations and things. I do remember, I think it was just last summer that things came up that relief nurseries, who I primarily work with, were eligible for, and we passed that along. And so I think what we can say is, as we, and if we hear anything coming from other state agencies or private kinds of foundations, we will definitely share those with you, so you'll know as soon as we do if there's other organizations supporting that kind of summer programming. So we'll definitely keep you in the loop as we hear anything. Lots of advocating for the summer funds, and we hear you loud and clear. We've seen, you know, the data and the stories that you have about summer loss, particularly with COVID. So we really appreciate your having your eye on that as well. We wish there was more. How much time do we have, Dana? We're getting a lot of really good questions in here.
We have 5 more minutes.
Okay. There's several questions I think about next year and slots and contracts and things, but I think you've addressed that in terms of we don't have a lot of specific details right now. Maybe just, I don't know if that's an accurate recap, but go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, and that's been like another question is like for the current grantees, like how some of you have families waiting. Actually, some of our grantees have like a wait list, and they have the desire to go ahead and serve more children and families. So we definitely are, you know, we'll need to go ahead and work through our procurement office. Like, what does that process look like? We know, I think another, as I mentioned earlier, like we're really going to be focusing the next couple weeks on continuing to examine our data, follow up with you, learn a little bit more, and just ensuring that you're successful with our grant deliverables. But then the other piece, we know this, you know, we have very low turnover with our grantees, and we know that sometimes that happens. So I'll go ahead and add our little advertisement here that if for some reason you are thinking about opting out from Preschool Promise, please do let us know. You know, definitely just send us an email. We'd love for all of our grantees to go ahead and continue. We're going to be checking some of our grant deliverables and see how things are. But then also, you know, if you are, you know, thinking about other programs or exiting from the program, please let us know, because that plays a role into like, do we have any slots to reallocate? What does that look like? But we'll need to go ahead and follow up with our procurement office about like what will be the process by which a grantee can request more slots, especially if they have families waiting for like their program. Because like I said, we do have some programs that have a wait list. Go ahead, Meredith.
I think, well, just a couple of things. Again, a lot of questions about slots. How do we increase slots? And so that's what we've just talked about. There's some comments and questions about ERDC and whether or not families, many of your families qualify for that, and you feel that many don't. I know there's been a lot of changes to ERDC within the last few months that will be coming out, and that's something that we can certainly share. We've got some really nice slide decks and things. If people are interested, we could share. Not sure how it will impact individual families that you serve, but a lot of expansion and some really good changes coming with ERDC. Somebody asked about the KPI summer grant application. I can take a look at that and get that posted as well. Let's see. Oh, somebody put it in the Washington County one in the chat box. And I think just some more feedback, Dana, just about the impact of delays to providers, to children and families. And we hear you. That is an ongoing conversation we're having here. Dana, is there anything you want to address about that and kind of as we roll into DELC?
No, I mean, I think right now, we're all committed to go ahead and making the next, program year kind of smoothly, to go ahead and be responsive to some of the delays, and which is why we're really excited to move into a multi-year grant, because that will go ahead and help provide some stability. So more to come on that, but we hear you. We know that the deadlines definitely impact everything within your program. Alrighty. Well, just to go ahead and close it up, reminders again, if you have not submitted all your reports, please get those in. The links are going to be included in that presentation. If you're needing some technical assistance about I'm not really sure how to submit my reports or anything, feel free to go ahead and reach out to us. And then don't forget, we have office hours on the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. and at 3 p.m. English and Spanish. So we ask you to go ahead and come and join us. And, we want to go ahead and make sure that we're more available to you. And then also it's a really nice space to go ahead and connect with other grantees as well and learn from each other. So that has been really nice to be able to go ahead and continue that. And we'll continue that through the end of the program year. So remember, second Tuesday of the month. And then don't forget all of your changes. If you're going to make any changes, please use the update and change form to go ahead and inform us of any changes in your programming. And if anything's going to be changing for your program for next program year, please go ahead and reach out to us and let us know as well. But thank you all for your time and for joining. Thank you. Have a great evening.